Hiya, Clark. I'm delighted to be chatting with such a prolific musician, producer, songwriter for the fabulous Johnny Hates Jazz. Myself and Steve Evans here.
Hello, Terry.
Hi,
Hello,
Clark.
Steve. Good to see you.
Yeah. Hi, Clark. It was really good to touch base with you finally. Now, just moving quickly on then. So I believe you were born in Surrey, but you've lived in the States and in Holland. But you're based in London now, is that right?
I'm actually back in Surrey, back
Oh,
where I
right. I
grew
know it.
up. I'm actually, although this room doesn't resemble the room that I used to be in, this is actually the room where I wrote Shattered Dreams and Turn Back the Clock and all those
Wow.
tracks. I'm actually here. My mom's 96-year-old, and I'm looking after her. So I'm back in the family home, and it's kind of it's weird being back in this neck of the woods. Like you say, I've lived all over the place, and I didn't, once I left Surrey, I lived in Bath for 10 years in Holland and the States, as you said, and so to be back here is kind of odd, but I'm enjoying doing this for my mom. It's really important.
Excellent. Yeah. So
Yeah.
roughly whereabouts in Surrey? Anywhere near Woking or Guildford?
Near
way?
Guildford, yeah, near Guildford, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
So
Know it
yeah,
quite
it's
well from years ago. I used to live down in about 5 miles from Woking for a couple of years, actually. So I know it
oh
really
cool.
well. Yeah.
Oh cool. Yeah, it's a
Oh,
cool part of the world. It's got its thing.
yeah. So do you get a chance to relax? I mean, you're just saying, you've got your mum, you're obviously looking after her, you've got studio work going on, all sorts, as we'll come on to. But do you have any hobbies besides music, relaxing
I'm
time?
glad you said that. Besides music, because you probably second guess most musicians' response to that is no, music is it. It's not a job. It's such a passion, so it's really hard to, I mean, there are times, of course, especially when you're working on an album, when you need to stop. And I tend to go for long walks in the countryside if I can. I'm very kind of country, well, rural oriented. But even if I'm recording in a city, I'll find the nearest park or the nearest woodland, and so I get out, and that's where I get my inspiration when I'm out with the land more than anywhere else. That's where I glean ideas, and I think that goes back to the poets of the 18 and 1700s. That's where they went. They got their inspiration from the wild places. So that's what I try to do as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Wordsworth, the daffodils. But sorry, I need to interrupt. We need to go to red alert. There's Klingons on the starboard bow.
Oh, hang on.
Very-
Oi, sort them out. Klingons.
Security.
The staff these
distracting,
days,
Terry.
on a starship.
You're probably going to hate this question. Probably always asked it. But tell us about the band title, Johnny Hates Jazz. Is it true about hating jazz?
Neither myself nor Mike, my colleague in the band, hate jazz at all.
Okay.
Johnny is actually Mike's brother-in-law. He is a real person, and he's from Cambridge. And there was a family gathering many years ago, mid-80s, I guess, and that Mike was at, and someone put on Take 5 by Dave Brubeck on the record player.
Yeah.
Johnny got up out of his chair, went over to the record player, tore the record off the player, and broke it in two over his knee.
Oh,
And someone exclaimed, Johnny hates jazz.
Yeah.
And for some reason, Mike remembered that strange little phrase. So when we came to name the band and he said that, I remember we laughed. There was a third member at that time, Calvin. We all laughed because we knew it was going to get a reaction from certain people. And then I realized, it's going to get a reaction from my dad because my dad's a professional jazz musician. This is bad news.
Yeah.
But the name stuck and it's kind of done us proud. So
It's a brilliant name.
yeah,
It's memorable. Yeah.
I always wondered about that name and I couldn't answer anyone because I've never looked it up and never realized. So yeah, that's really interesting. Anyway, you've recently done quite a few gigs, one of them in Liverpool. What was that like and where was it in Liverpool? Was it the Empire?
No, it was a very small venue, Prohibition Recording Studios. So in Hope Street, and so just around the corner from the Philharmonic, and it was it's a beautiful, magical venue. But I did that really to celebrate the launch of my most recent solo album, Journey Songs 2. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a while. I did Journey Songs 1 last year, Journey Songs 2 this year. And they're basically 3 CD each anthologies of my solo work. This is everything I did post leaving Johnny Hates Jazz, which I did originally in '88 and didn't return for another 20 years. So I lived a life in that 20 years that no one was really very aware of, because it was a very unusual path that I walked, but I was writing and recording all the time. So yeah, I did it at Prohibition Recording Studios, and very small audience, but very dedicated audience. I had people flying from the United States to see it.
Wow.
Certain songs that I'd written, in terms of my solo work, really, really meant a lot to them. People from the States, people from Germany, people from Belgium, and obviously people from here and from Ireland. So it was a lovely, magical evening.
It is as you said, it's a great area around Hope Street. There's some brilliant buildings as well and architecture.
Cathedral both ends.
I gotta say, I really bonded with Liverpool this time. I really fell a little bit in love, which I should have done a lot sooner. But often when you're performing, as you know, you kind of fly through a place and you don't really have enough time to get to know it. And this was different. This was a very emotive experience, and I can see myself spending a lot more time up there.
I saw it on your Facebook page that you posted a couple of photos there. I think you've done one outside Strawberry Fields, I think.
I did, yeah. I did the day after the gig. Yeah, I went to Penny Lane to Strawberry Fields. I know it's the tourist thing. Look, on the way back to Surrey, on the long, grueling journey, that Sunday, I played the whole of the Red album and the whole of the Blue album, Beatles Red album and Blue album, really mainly, and I was streaming it so I could hear Now and Then as part of the album, because of course the copies I've got don't have Now and Then on it. I had them when they originally came out, and it was very, very emotional, because like most people of our generations, the Beatles were everything. They were not only remarkable creators of music, but what they did in the world said to us here in Britain, we could do that too. If we work hard enough, if we're prepared to learn our craft, we could do that too. That's what the Beatles meant to me. So that was I'd never done that before. I'd never done those touristy things, and I found it very emotional.
Brilliant. There's one of the statues, I think it was in Matthew Street, but it says on the plaque on the base of the statue, it says 4 lads who shook the world, which is a great.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? And shook the world in so many ways, because let's just talk music for a minute. Their music is progressively complex without it being a difficult listen, but no one should doubt any of their abilities. I mean, especially Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison as writers, just phenomenal stuff. But I mean, I was looking forward to starting the Red album, because I wanted to hear all the early stuff as well. That's what I grew up listening to. So there will never be another band like the Beatles. There never can be. And I think but that said, they paved the way for decades of music coming out of Britain that also affected the world very deeply, I think.
Clark, you mentioned your dad, Fred, a famous singer and saxophonist back in the 50s with 2 bands, the Stargazers and the Polka Dots, and singing with the likes of Frank Sinatra, the Beatles. Petula Clark, after whom you were named. Tell us about this. Was it a glamorous childhood? All these huge names.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't glamorous, really, because that had happened before I was born. By the time I came along in '64, rock and roll, ironically led by the Beatles, had kind of ended the primary position that jazz had in the music scene. We've got to remember that jazz now we see as a niche genre. Back then, it was the dominant genre: 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s, and so when I came along, my dad was he was wrestling with that, the fact that his world, in a way, had ended and it had to transform, and there was a great sadness in him because of that. I mean, he'd sung on "I Am the Walrus" and on "Long and Winding Road." So he'd had experience of them, and he'd worked with a very young Jimmy Page before there was any such thing as Led Zeppelin, and with these big names as well. So he had a lot of stories if you could get them out of him.
Yeah.
But he influenced me incredibly, though. I mean, the house was full of jazz. For someone who joined a band called Johnny Hates Jazz, it is ironic. I grew up listening to Count Basie and Duke Ellington, and Nat King Cole's my favorite singer still. So yeah, he was really big influence on me.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about the title, Shattered Dreams. Now, I know you wrote a lot of your music with Johnny Hates Jazz was about anti-war stuff. So was Shattered Dreams part and parcel of that? Did you write that with the music in your head, or did the lyrics come first? And tell us a little bit about it, how it all came about.
My writing process, I'm actually looking over there past the navigation console where Sulu and Chekhov, for some reason, have gone off on their tea break or something. But my upright piano is over there, actually next to Spock Station, and that's where I wrote those songs. And usually what happens when I write, still the same now, is a melodic idea and a lyrical idea will come simultaneously. The only exceptions are if I've come up with a title already, and I often do that. I come up with a title, and it's kind of like a point on the map. It's saying, I like that title. It's going to say something. I've got to figure out what it's going to say now. And that's where I'll head towards. So that often opens the door of creativity. But usually, if I'm playing piano, I also play guitar and bouzouki, Irish bouzouki. I write stuff on as well, just because it's different. That ideas come all at once, and Shattered Dreams is no exception. The chorus and the lyric just happened.
So, just while we're talking about, well, Johnny Hates Jazz, if you like, but I also know you wrote for Mike and the Mechanics, didn't you? Did you ever actually perform with them, with Mike Rutherford and the guys?
No, I didn't. I'm back in the day, back in the 80s, I'd met Mike a few times on the road, and he was always really generous, really kind, lovely fella. I never thought I'd end up writing with him many years later. But when I came on board, Paul Young and Paul Carrick had passed away. Obviously, Paul Carrick had left. So they'd been replaced by Andrew Roachford and Tim Hauer. So yeah, so they were already a thing. They'd done one album, and they needed to kind of move things along. So it was suggested that I write with Mike Rutherford one day, see how it goes. I went over to his house, thought, oh, this will be interesting. You know, I really like Mike, and I love Genesis. I love Mike and the Mechanics, ironically. Silent Running was one of my favorite records in the 80s.
Superb,
yeah. And then, you know what, I have to say, when he started playing something to me, my jaw metaphorically dropped, because I thought to myself, that's Genesis. I'm hearing Genesis, because no one plays like him. No one uses chords the way he does. It all seems, in a way, to him, probably quite chaotic. It's not at all. It's brilliant. And we ended up writing for months together, also with Andrew and Tim, but mostly me and Mike and Andrew. And it was a great experience. I saw Mike on the last Mechanics tour and the last Genesis tour after the gigs, and he said, you know, we got to write next year for some more Mechanic stuff. So it's a lovely thing for me. There's no pressure of performance. I can just go there as a writer, and I don't write for other people very much. It's not my thing. But when it comes to Mike Rutherford, that's another matter. That it gives me something, it teaches me something, and that's why I do it.
Yeah, some great music out there. I mean, one of my all-time favorite tracks is Miracle. You know, All I Need is a Miracle. That one.
Great song.
I just love that, as well as Shattered Dreams, obviously.
Thank you. Well said. Well said.
You mentioned that you've traveled globally. You've sold albums throughout basically the whole globe, all over the world. But I've read that you found spending time in Japan an almost spiritual experience. Was this different than all the places that you've toured?
I think it was. And although whenever I go to a place, even if I go to a city, for example, when I first went to Liverpool, I went to the Mersey. You know, that's why the place exists, because of the river. It's like London and the Thames. You know, So I always go to those places to kind of acknowledge them, that for all the grandeur around them and people, it's actually because of these places, these specific places that we know the world as we do. So with Japan, I very much went to the land, although I was in Tokyo and Osaka and Kyoto. I went to the land to really connect. And what I found interesting about there is that, we have to remember that they're not classically religious. They are, Shintoism is their philosophy. It's not really religion. And it's deeply embedded in the Japanese psyche. So it's a very humble, honoring, nature-oriented philosophy. It doesn't mean they don't have their problems. Of course they do.
Yeah.
But I found being amongst them and being with that land almost one and the same experience. They mirror their land, and their land is magical and ancient, and somehow their spiritual philosophy, like I say, is influenced by their experience of the land. I don't mean to be too, I'm kind of giving a very broad view of it. It's whereas the traditional organized religions we're kind of aware of now and in the past don't have that same relationship with the land. Not even Buddhism does. Shintoism is unique in that way. It's more akin to the Native American perspective, or the ancient, or the ancient Celtic perspective. So I really love the fact that they somehow made it part of their modern world. It wasn't consigned to ancient history. It was still somehow present in how they live their lives.
Last year, the retrospective Journey Songs 1 box set was released. Now, I was going to concentrate a little bit on that, but Journey Songs 2 now is out as well, isn't it? So
it is.
Tell us a bit about that. Is that a solo anthology?
Yes, it is. So Journey Songs 1, just because you touched on that, was recordings that I did post Johnny H. Jazz, 1988 to 1992. And there were a few albums and recordings that I hadn't released before. An album called Raindance
and Fishing for Souls,
Fishing for Souls, and then some tracks again that had never been released before. So I put that together on Journey Songs 1, and I did that because during lockdown, I had started live streaming, like a lot of musicians had. I started live streaming just to reach people who like my music, and I decided to do a song every episode. Every time I live stream, I talk about one song I'd written. So I started with the well-known Johnny Hates Jazz ones, and then gradually got into my solo work because it was a way for people to get to know me and not just think of me as the guy from 35 years ago singing Shattered Dreams, which is wonderful, fine, but it could go a lot deeper because I lived, like I said, quite an unusual life. So I decided to put these recordings onto Journey Songs 1. I carried on live streaming. Journey Songs as a live stream has continued. It's now nearly at its 60th episode. And Journey Songs 2 has come out, which is recordings that I did when I was based at Real World Studios down in Bath, Peter Gabriel's studio. I was there for 10 years, did loads of high-level recordings down there, and then moved to the States, did an album called Tomorrow in my own solar-powered home studio in Arizona, very environmentally oriented. And here it is. It's all on this one album, Journey Songs 2, which has kind of got off to a good start. So it's part and parcel of the live streams. It's a world that I didn't realize I was going to create, and I seem to have done so. So I'm going to continue whilst Johnny Hates Jazz does its thing as well.
Wow, yeah. So Arizona, I was over there myself last year. Funnily
Where the snakes were, Steve.
Is that
where you had the snakes? We had the snakes on the
that's the one. Yeah, my sister lives there, doesn't she? So yeah.
Whereabouts, Steve? Where in Arizona?
Phoenix, Arizona, a place called Wickenburg.
I know Wickenburg.
Oh, do
and
you really?
Had I do know Wickenburg, yes. And you had an experience with what, a rattler, a rattlesnake?
Well, I was lucky in the end. We found a snake traveling across the road in front of us, and we stopped and got out because they said, "Come and have a look." And I was like, "I'm not going anywhere near it." Luckily enough, unfortunately, this snake had been run over, so it was still alive, but it was dying off. So we were able to, I mean, it was a bit sad really, but we were able to have a look at it close up with and not worry about it biting us. But I did see a few, and it's a bit scary when you just stumble across the odd snake,
Yeah, rattlesnakes are really interesting as a slight aside, because of course they're the only snake that lets you know that they're there. That's why they rattle as a warning. So I grew to kind of respect them and to realize that they're actually they're the more compassionate snakes, shall we say. They don't want to hurt us, Anyway.
But the other thing was, detracting again, was scorpions everywhere. Oh, my sister's got a swimming pool in a garden, and we come out in the morning and there'd be scorpions in the bottom of the pool that fell in, and you had to fish them all out before you could go in, and they came from nowhere. It was incredible. Yeah.
Guys, I gotta tell you, one morning I woke up and in Arizona, I opened my eyes, and right next to me on the pillow is a baby scorpion, which is far more dangerous than an adult.
Is it?
Yeah.
I did not know. I just froze. What the hell do you do? Do you go slowly? Do you bolt out of the room? I went for the latter. I ran, and then I got it out. But no. It's something you don't ever get used to. I think this is the same with people in Australia. Aussies kind of say, you know what, the spider thing is, what can you do?
Yeah.
That's where they are. So.
Yeah, the thing, Terry, just to explain the thing about the babies, they're more poisonous than the adult.
Why?
Because they don't know how much venom to release, so they just hit you with it all, whereas an adult knows how to release so much. The babies don't, so they're potentially more lethal.
I'll avoid all of them, child and parents. Clark, you mentioned live streams. Where can people get to see the live streams? This on YouTube?
It is. So there's two places right now. The main place is YouTube. So that's youtube.com/Clark Datchler official.
Okay.
You can also see it up until the end of the year on facebook.com/Clark Datchler official. It goes out on both places, but it's going to move exclusively to YouTube next year. So, and at the moment, the next one actually is this coming Sunday, and then there'll be one on the 17th of December, which is the winter solstice special. Okay. I've done 3 winter solstice specials, I think. Is it 3 or 2? I can't remember. And they're always quite special because I kind of, I put lots of lights and candles up on the bridge of the Enterprise, and it's very lovely, and lots of songs performed and everything. So they're always well attended, and the Journey Songs community, the people who watch it are lovely, and they all chat to each other, in real time in a live chat. So it's very interactive.
That sounds great.
Yeah, you also did a charity single, didn't you, called "Shattered Dreams of Ukraine"?
Oh yeah.
In support of Poland welcomes, and that got to number 6 in the was it Mike Reed's Heritage chart? Mike Reed's a guy we had an interview with about a year or so ago, didn't we, Terry?
Yeah.
But that so that did quite well, really, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that Shattered Dreams of Ukraine, which actually is now going to be changed into, because because the war has taken all kinds of twists and turns over there. Poland Welcomes as a charity has changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
So that particular record is going to be pointed at a broader charity, probably UNHCR. But it did well, and it was really, though, designed to just encourage people to donate, because, as you know, streaming doesn't make anyone any money. Unless you're one of the uber successful people. So it was really a calling card saying, and I was one more person of many saying, let's try and do something to help. Let's try and give some money to the charities that are on the ground trying to help those people. I went over to Poland to see the work the charity did, and it was quite confronting, actually, as an experience. To talk to refugees, as I did out there, Ukrainian refugees, and realize that, doing a track like that, a re-recording of Shattered Dreams, is the least I could do, and hopefully it will continue to help in some way until that awful conflict is over.
You mentioned live streams. Tell us about plans for touring. Where can we get to see you next and in the near future?
So Johnny, I'm focused on Johnny Hates Jazz.
Some new news have you had recently?
Well, we're on tour next year, and
Okay.
the tour dates are going to be announced very soon.
Yep.
It's quite extensive, and we're kind of we've got a lot of our UK dates lined up, but more are being added overnight.
Liverpool again, maybe.
I really hope so. I haven't looked at the latest list. I'm pretty sure. I mean, we have to be. It would be, it wouldn't be a tour without coming to Liverpool, or at least close by.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's going to be a lot of Johnny Hates Jazz activity, a lot. And I don't mean to sound too cryptic about that, but I think it's going to be really, really exciting. At the same time as Journey Song continuing and changing, actually morphing, changing, quite exciting times coming up. Yeah.
Final question I've got, really. What advice do you give to a musician who's just starting out, if you like? What's the best thing or best advice you'd give someone who wants to make it big time? And I know that's a bit of an open-ended question.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's a big world out there, but what's the best
I'd say this. And I've done this before to young musicians. I'd say, why? Why do you want to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's to become famous, it's a tough call these days. If it's to become wealthy, it's a really tough call.
Yeah.
If it's that you love music, okay, that's great. A lot of people do, though. I'm a great believer that to think about music as a tool, possibly as a weapon sometimes, because we're in a time of information overload, opinion overload. And if ever we need music with something to say that offers some hope and some vision and some compassion in the world we live in, it's now. And in actual fact, I think it's never been in shorter supply. There was far more of it in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, a bit in the 90s. And so I would say to young musicians, really think about why you want to do it. Because you know what, if you get a chance to be heard, it's going to be in time and space for a nanosecond. So make it important. Make sure you're prepared, that you know what to say. Because if all you want to say is, you got a sexy body, baby, then you're just going to be one more musician on the song mountain,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that mountain is getting very, very high. But if you want to be as important as, I mean, I don't mean to say as important as Lennon and McCartney, it's impossible. But if you want to be in that pantheon, then you got to really think about that. Because I mean, I was listening to Revolution, and which is a predominantly Lennon song, obviously. It's an amazing lyric.
Yeah.
And it's so profound and poignant for now. It's not, I'm not talking about Imagine. It'd be easy to talk about Imagine, or, Sergeant Pepper's, or whatever it is. Think everything you do, you got to think about. That's what I say to a young musician. Make it important, make it count. Because if that moment comes, you've got to realize that it won't last forever. So do your best. That's my advice.
Okay, it does seem as well these days the only way into music is going into these like reality shows, or these these shows like X Factor and all that, rather than the traditional way of just going to a producer and saying, what do you think of this? There's a lot of this competition out there. That there's so much competition, isn't it?
I think we have to remember that those singing competitions, which is what they are. Look, this that is a can of worms. The fact of the matter is that so much changed in the 90s. As much as there were some really good bands in the 90s, so much changed with a very simple thing: the bringing together of music and reality television. Who did that start with? It started with Take That. That's how Take That was formed. Esther Rantzen. It was a concocted environment, which then brought about all kinds of copycat boy bands, girl bands, and it led to the explosion of Pop Idol and American Idol and X Factor and The Voice and all this stuff. Look, right now, the way these shows operate is that it's not that someone shows up off the street and does an audition. They're hunting for talent. It's an industry. Everything's arranged now. They're getting artists who are signed to labels, who come on the show who make out that they're not signed to a label. And I don't mean that to be cynical about it. I'm just saying we've got to see it for what it is. It's only entertainment, folks. And you know, when I was growing up and I was so into music, music was not entertainment. It was its own universe. Entertainment was Saturday night television. You know, it was watching the football on a Sunday. Music was its own universe, and to me it still is. So I don't, you know, it can be entertaining, but it's got to be more.
It's a sausage factory, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is,
on,
exactly.
You bang on, Clark.
Clark,
to make it fabricated, basically, don't they, to make it as they want to on TV, on these X Factor programs and all that, so it looks like they're just off the street, as you say. But I know a lot of them aren't.
Of course. Originally they were, of course, but not now.
I know what you mean.
I suspect that about Will Young, his fame. I thought they'd done like a sort of a clumsy audition so that you could see sort of on a graph how much he improves as he goes along in the process, and he ends up as the finished article. I'm pretty sure he went in there with that finished article voice and mannerism and style, you know, without the program.
But Little Mix was similar. Little Mix was similar. One track I heard when they were on X Factor, I thought that is awful. And the next thing, they're out there with the next week with this fantastic song, and then they exploded onto the scene. You know,
it's how you build it. It's you know, unfortunately, it's been with us for about 30 years. That kind of model, I guess, 25, 30 years. So it's a very well-oiled machine. So that's why when you actually hear real music, people who have really, you know, worked hard, whether it's on the gig circuit or through recordings or whatever, I appreciate them even more now, I think.
Yeah, true. But like as I mentioned, time's caught up with us, but it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, and really appreciate you spending time with us.
Well, thank you very much, Terry and Steve. Great questions. And,
thank you.
You know, and you come from one of the best parts of not just the country, but the world. So it's always a pleasure.
Love it. Thanks very much.
Super. Thank you very much. Well,
cheers for now. Thanks,
pleasure.
Take care, guys. See ya.
Bye.